we're headed for a vote in Moscow on March 4th. And at this program, as you know, we're firmly in the pro-Putin camp. We want Putin and nobody else as president of Russia. And we want Putin minus Kudrin, minus Medvedev, minus the appeasers, minus the neoliberals. We want a Russian government worthy of the name. This is simply a friendly gesture, not interfering or anything of the kind. So what we're told is that the Kremlin, in other words, the Russian media, and we're going to try to follow this more. I'm quoting here from an article in today's Washington Post, Saturday, February 18th. Putin allies sharpen anti-U.S. attacks ahead of election. And it says this reflects KGB and Soviet thinking. What does the Obama foreign policy represent? Right? Is it seems it represents von Ribbentrop's kind of thinking, or maybe rollback in the Cold War, right? The more extreme ones. We're told that a favorite target of the attacks is Michael McFaul. Now, this is very interesting. Michael McFaul, of course, is a quackademic. He was blabbing all the way during the 1990s, big supporter of shock therapy, big supporter of Yeltsin, of Gaidar, of Chubais, of Anders Aslund, and Jeffrey Sachs, these hyenas of shock therapy that wrecked the Russian economy, precipitated the entire Soviet middle class into abject poverty. So he's now on the scene, and he's rightly being targeted as the attempted bringer of the White Revolution. When McFaul arrived in Moscow on January 14th, McFaul and Deputy Secretary of State William Burns were entering the U.S. Embassy. They were accosted by a group of young people identifying themselves as television reporters and demanding to know the purpose of the visit. And the point is that the Russian opposition is paid for by the National Endowment for Democracy and, of course, the CIA. And they're right. That's what it is. It goes back on November 27th. Putin began targeting Golos, the so-called election watchdog. In reality, it's a means of launching color revolutions by claiming that elections are not accurate. This paid for by the U.S. The Russian parliament, the Duma, is considering a ban of all foreign grants to Russian organizations. Go ahead and do it. We support it from over here. We don't want tax money being spent on that. That's not the kind of foreign aid we want. Put that money into emergency food aid so a few fewer people starve to death in the Horn of Africa. But don't give it to somebody like Navalny, right, with his fascist gesticulations. So how much U.S. money is involved? Well, we know Navalny represents Yale, Harvard, and this is even now an issue. A columnist on the RT website usefully finds that Hillary Clinton, and former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright had ordered McFaul to groom revolutionaries, that is, subversion operatives in Russia, and that McFaul had sent prominent blogger Alexei Navalny to Yale as part of that project. Well, that's where he went. He went to Yale, to Harvard, to Cambridge with money from the National Endowment for Democracy. But McFaul, the ambassadorial quackademic, tweets that it's not true. U.S. money being used to stir up the White Revolution, absolutely. Now, our last complex of today, the U.S. presidential race. And, the news we have is once again about Ron Paul. And in particular, we have news about Ron Paul's presumably largest single financial backer. He is a guy called Peter Thiel, Thiel. Peter Thiel has given Ron Paul, or better yet, a super PAC supporting Ron Paul, which allows a contribution of this size. Peter Thiel, or Thiel, has given Ron Paul $900,000, so almost $1 million, has gone to a super PAC called Endorse Liberty. Who is Peter Thiel? He is the founder of PayPal. He rakes off commissions on these PayPal payments. But most interesting for our purposes, he is a member of the Bilderberger Group, that group of wealthy reactionary elitists founded by Prince Bernhard of Holland and also Prince Philip of Great Britain. Peter Thiel is not only a member of the Bilderberger Group, he's a member of the Bilderberger Steering Committee. So he's not just a wealthy elitist of the ultra 1%. He is practically the 0.00001% that is represented by the Bilderberger Steering Committee. So he gives $1 million to Ron Paul. What are Peter Thiel's other activities? He has a foundation which encourages students to drop out of college. Isn't that great? This is obviously an attack on the family. Anybody who's been a parent, you know the sacrifices you make to put your kid into college, right, to get financial aid, to do the tests, to do all these other things. And then Peter Thiel comes along and says, oh, I'm a multimillionaire. You can do it too. You should drop out. And the kid drops out. Now, it's clear what this is. The reactionaries have always hated the GI Bill of Rights. They can't stand the idea that the middle class, the lower middle class, and even significant parts of the working class get to go to college. They want to make college what it was, say, in the 1920s, the exclusive preserve of the richest elitists, of the best families from which the mass of the U.S. population are excluded. So they're attempting to roll back the GI Bill of Rights on home ownership and also on college education. And you can hear reactionaries, all kinds, saying that, you know, college education is not a good deal. We shouldn't allow it. There's too much money flowing into education. It's time to break that up. They regard this as a center of political opposition to their reactionary plans. And there's some truth to that, although the ideological problems of the colleges are other, in another or Malthusian direction or postmodernist direction. But the goal here, obviously, is to discredit the idea of a college education, right? To try to attack this and to show that it's cool to get a grant from Peter Thiel and drop out of college. The other thing this rich reactionary elitist Thiel does is, well, he's a Republican, and he's actually a gay activist inside the Republican Party. And he advocates what is known as seasteading. It's like this, if you know the Kevin Costner Waterworld movie, the Waterworld where there's no land, right? That post-apocalyptic future. I think with Peter Thiel, it's clear he wants to create sovereign entities that float, and he wants to therefore escape the laws of existing nation states to do what? Well, obviously speculation, right? There's no better way to be offshore than to be all the way offshore, and other nefarious activities. Just let your imagination work, and you can conclude what they are. So that's a very interesting one. We want to remember that Ron Paul, in his speech in 2001 in the floor of the House, has assured us there is nothing to fear from globalism, free trade, and a single world currency. Globalism, free trade, and a single world currency represent nothing to fear. Globalism, of course, deregulation that brought you derivatives, privatization that brought you Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac as for-profit entities, deregulation, privatization, union busting, and of course the Paul dynasty interested in smashing unions everywhere they can with their right-to-work law. I'm very sorry to say that the right-to-work law, union busting law, more accurately, has now been passed in Indiana. So Indiana now joins the backward southern states with their low-wage economies and their lack of worker rights and other protections. So too bad for Indiana. We'll have to refight that one at the earliest opportunity. Deregulation, privatization, union busting, the destruction of a state sector, if you have one, the destruction of the social safety net, and we still do have one. That's globalism. So Ron Paul says, don't worry about any of that. That's all fine. Universal free trade is fine. No government, no state gets to influence what goes in and out of its own borders. And a single world currency, and that would be a commodity currency. It would be gold, right, which these gold fetishists believe is somehow the natural money. That is a different path to the New World Order, but it is equally destructive. In other words, it's clear that these Freemasonic forces have attempted to cover both the establishment route, which is the one you see with neocons and wars, and then there's the what can we say, the low-cost version with globalism enacted simply by law, free trade imposed everywhere, and this one world currency. It all comes from the Austrian school of von Mises and von Hayek. And we're reminded, various things popping up on the internet, it is the Rockefeller family, the arch reactionary finance capitalists par excellence, who funded Mises and others when they came to the United States. They supported them with research grants, got them jobs at the University of Chicago, which of course was founded by Rockefeller. So this entire Austrian construct is a Rockefeller special. And I don't know what would make that more explicit, that people who are prating about the need to implement the discredited and indeed hated doctrines of the Austrian school, that somehow this is the true American tradition. I'm sorry, I missed that. I don't see any discussion of the Austrian school in the Constitutional Convention. I can't find it in the Constitution. I don't find it in the Gettysburg Address or the House Divided Speech, or indeed in any of the fireside chats, except as something to be mocked and to be opposed. So that's the Austrian school. And then one final item here in the New York Times, the 17th of February, 2012, yesterday, as we tape, the New York Times writes, Mitt Romney and Ron Paul, friendly amid the rivalry. And this refers to what I've been pointing out for a number of weeks. I put it out on Twitter and on this broadcast. There is a united front between Ron Paul, who pretends to be the peace candidate, and Mitt Romney, the arch-reactionary, genocidal warmonger and asset stripper. This is a convergence, and it's just there. They are described as friends on the trail, that Romney went out of his way to cultivate Paul early on. Notice that the critique of Romney done by Ron Paul and his followers is purely pro forma, that he's a flip-flopper. Wow. This, as Paolo Sarpi would say, this is the art of saying something nice about somebody while pretending to say something bad. If you're a genocidal warmonger and an asset stripper, then to say that you're a flip-flopper, this is truly pretty small beer. So it's a way to keep various dupes engaged, right, to make them think that you're doing a critique of Romney. But there is no bad blood. Rather, there's tremendous goodwill. According to the New York Times, Ron Paul generally says that Santorum, Gingrich, and Romney are identical. They're all the same. But then, quote, Ron Paul seems to segregate those views from their personal relations. So the idea is that there's a close friendship of the families. Ann Romney gets along really well with Carol Paul. The children and grandchildren are all very friendly. And the article points to the obvious moment in the South Carolina primary when Perry and Gingrich were correctly attacking Romney as an asset stripper and a hedge fund hyena and vulture capitalist. That was when Ron Paul came out and defended Romney as embodying the spirit of capitalism. Ron Paul got $8 million he got $10 million in the first quarter. He expects to. He got $13 million in the fourth quarter of last year and $8 million in the third quarter. of last year. And I don't know whether that reflects the almost 1 million from the Bilderberger Steering Committee member Peter Thiel. What could underline the convergence of Romney and Paul? I've suggested in the past. There are two obvious things. One is racial views. The Mormon Church notoriously, the holy books still say that if you're black, you cannot be saved, you cannot be a member of the clergy, and you are cast into the outer darkness where there is much wailing and gnashing of teeth. And that has been, there are certain cosmetic changes, but the main text has never been changed. It still stands. And if you go to Salt Lake City, Utah, you'll find it's the most lily white place in the world that I've ever seen. Anyway, so there's that racial view, and that seems to dovetail pretty well with what Ron Paul represents, which is the Scottish Rite southern branch, the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry based in Cincinnati. It's a branch of a British-Scottish operation, and these are the Dixiecrats. These are the Confederates. These are the people who brought you Civil War, nullification, interposition, the Dixiecrat Party of the 1940s, Strom Thurmond, and all the rest of them. That's the Scottish Rite Southern jurisdiction. So there I see a clear convergence. And those quotes in the Ron Paul newsletters, they're over a period of 7 or 8 years. They're very explicit. They will not go away. You cannot say I was unaware of this stuff. That is a bad joke. And if you didn't write them, then who did? Was it Lou Rockwell? Who was it? The other question then is the deregulation of marriage. We know that Ron Paul's freedom agenda, he says liberty across the board. The deregulation of marriage means that the federal government will have no definition of marriage whatsoever. And the states can then do whatever they want. And the states can then say, whatever any church says is a marriage is a marriage. And that would presumably include the polygamy, which is still also prescribed in the holy books of the Mormon Church. It would also open the door wide to Sharia law. It would open the door wide to polygamy of that kind, which is generally not practiced in some place like Iraq before before the U.S. invasion or Libya, right? But it's the polygamous part of it is something that's generally de-emphasized in the non-monarchical parts of the Arab or Islamic world as a general rule. So the deregulation of marriage that Ron Paul wants would seem to dovetail also with the concern perhaps of the Mormons who would like to bring back polygamy. So what it shows, of course, is that people supporting these candidates really need to study them and realize what it is you're supporting, because otherwise you'll get all sorts of very nasty and ugly surprises. And as an example, we need look no further than Obama, right? People who believed Obama's peace rhetoric found that he didn't intend anything like that, and indeed he intended quite the opposite. And let me just refer in closing once again. I was on an international cable news debate this past week with a lady who was she represented the national leadership of the Libertarian Party. And they say they're probably going to nominate Gary Johnson, the reactionary former governor of one of the southwestern states who did appear in one of the Republican debates. But she was willing also to defend Ron Paul. And she said, you can't expect Ron Paul to take advantage of the fact that he's the only serving member of the House of Representatives in the Republican field and do something like impeach Obama for the Libyan war or impeach Panetta for opening the door wide to a ruinous U.S. Involvement against Iran. You can't expect that. He's busy out on the campaign trail. And again, I have to say, too busy to do something to stop World War III. That's just pathetic. And that indicates a suspension, not just of disbelief, but a suspension of intelligence and thinking, which is, I think, scandalous in its own right. It's time to open our eyes and see what's going on. Now, a couple of housekeeping notes here at the very end. If you don't find my program on GCN Live, as has been the case now over the last 3 weeks, unfortunately, you've got to come to tarpley.net, and you go to the World Crisis Radio page of tarpley.net, and you will find this broadcast. Now, I did one broadcast from Iran. It was possible since there was no Skype, no telephone, and no all sorts of other things, no Twitter and various others. What I was able to do was to tape and make some MP3 tapes on a computer, send those as part of an email. Those were then reassembled. So I refer you back to that one. That was a couple of interviews, one on Bahrain and one with a distinguished talk show host, Nader of the Raz program. An interview with him of about an hour. Extremely interesting and very insightful, very thoughtful person. That's available as the last item here on World Crisis Radio through tarpley.net. And now we've got this one. So please do take a look. And whenever you don't find it at Genesis Communications Network, then please look for it here at tarpley.net. And otherwise, always look to tarpley.net. I've got a couple of interviews this week from Press TV. I'll have the one from Atlantic Television News up presumably during the course of the next week. Always go to tarpley.net and always take a look at Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed, where the media appearances are announced in advance, at least usually, so that you can see those live if that's the easiest way for you to see it. So with that, let me come to an end of this week's broadcast. And again, we're just wrapping up here on the afternoon of Saturday, the 18th of February, 2012. And we'll see you again next week, presumably on gcnlive.com. But again, if for some technical reason that doesn't work out, always check here at tarpley.net. We'll see you next week.